Hi, so we are going to continue with anxiety. This is part 4, I believe, and we are talking about dread, which is probably why I didn't want to record, because who wants to focus on dread? I dreaded recording this, and also fear and how those things can relate to anxiety. So again, Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, and the first section having to do with anxiety. Dread occurs frequently in response to high probability negative events. Its magnitude increases as the dreaded event draws nearer. Does that relate to anyone? What is some event in your life? It could be a tiny day-to-day thing, or it could be something bigger, like a huge event that you kind of feel a sense of dread about. Because dread makes an anticipated negative event even worse, we often prefer to get unpleasant things over with quickly, even if doing them sooner means that they will be more unpleasant. For example, a more painful procedure now is preferred to a less painful procedure later, right? Pulling off the Band-Aid. So I have a client right now who has had trouble reacclimating to going to in-person school and really has a delayed response to actually going back, and in the morning feels panic, but also the night before perhaps feels dread around going back to school. And so we talked about this concept of pulling off the Band-Aid. Like sometimes we have to override the system that is telling us, or the emotions that are telling us that we can't go or we can't do this thing, and actually just put our body in motion, because we know that this thing is necessary, because the outcome of not doing it will actually be worse, which is a really hard thing to practice, and we all have to do it at different times in our lives. And if we don't, then we end up in a not great place for ourselves. We're not achieving our goals, the standards of our lives that we maybe wish we would have. So it's important to be able to practice that muscle of overriding the feelings when we're feeling a bit of dread about something that we know actually will help our lives in the future. I felt so called out when I read this. I can convince myself that an experience is going to be disastrous and work myself into a dread frenzy. It's terrible, because even if it goes well, I'm so dread exhausted that I can't enjoy it. For anxiety and dread, the threat is in the future. For fear, the threat is now, in the present. Fear is a negative, short-lasting, high-alert emotion in response to a perceived threat. And like anxiety, it can be measured as a state or a trait. Some people have a higher propensity to experience fear than others. Fear arises when we need to respond quickly to physical or psychological danger that is present and imminent. Because fear is a rapid-fire emotion, the psychological response can sometimes occur before we even realize that we are afraid. Typical responses are fight, flight, or freeze, and now also fawn. In the research, you can find many lists of what elicits fear in us. The items range from rodents and snakes to the inability to see our surroundings to observing our children in peril. However, no matter how much the lists vary, one item on every list I've seen, the fear of social rejection. Also relating to my client who's having a hard time returning to school. We can never forget that we experience social pain and physical pain in the same part of our brains, and the potential exposure to either type of pain drives fear. To close this section, thank goodness we're closing anxiety section, I want to go back to my friend and mentor, Dr. Harriet Lerner. She writes, "Throughout evolutionary history, anxiety and fear have helped every species to be wary and to survive. Fear can signal us to act, or alternatively, to resist the impulse to act. It can help us to make wise, self-protective choices in and out of relationships where we might otherwise sail mindlessly along, ignoring signs of trouble." Like all of the experiences in this book, both our anxiety and our fear need to be understood and respected, perhaps even befriended. We need to pull up a chair and sit with them, understand why they're showing up, and ask ourselves what there is to learn. Dismissing fear and anxiety as not useful to our quest for connection is as dangerous as choosing to live in constant fear and anxiety. So I love this idea of befriending all emotions. And she's just talking specifically right now about fear and anxiety. But I know Elizabeth Gilbert also has a prompt where she uses writing a letter to different emotions, either thanking them or asking them questions about why they're showing up. So it took me a few minutes, actually a full day, to kind of find Elizabeth Gilbert's resource. And I am going to put the link to her YouTube for her letter she has written to fear. So she's speaking specifically to the fear about creating, and as a writer, how fear accompanies creativity, how it might be received, what we think of ourselves, are we good enough, and then potential critique from others that receive or experience the artwork. So I'm going to just leave it there, give you the link to the YouTube, watch it. It's literally less than 2 minutes. And then ask you if maybe you want to write your own letter to fear, or perhaps another emotion that seems to be coming up. It could be one of the emotions that we have spoken about: anxiety, dread, fear, all of the ones we've talked about in this kind of unit of anxiety. And if you want to, you can share some of that in whatever form it takes. If it's a letter, a piece of artwork, a collage, a video, etc., on the Make with Jae YouTube page. So I look forward to hearing back from you and seeing how you're experiencing this exploration of all human emotions as we began with Atlas of the Heart and this feeling of anxiety and the accompanying feelings as well.